It was a bitterly cold morning at Franklin High. The sky was heavy with dark, rolling clouds that threatened rain, as if nature itself mourned the injustices about to unfold. Every step on the cracked pavement echoed as students shuffled into the building, their breaths visible in the frosty air. Among them, a lone figure stood out, a young girl whose eyes burned with quiet defiance.
I stood before the imposing entrance of Franklin High, clutching a handmade protest sign so fragile yet filled with meaning. Every fiber of the cardboard and every shaky letter of "We deserve justice" vibrated with my determination. My hands trembled, a mix of the biting cold and a rising storm of emotion. I felt both terrified and empowered, terrified that the world might dismiss my voice, yet empowered by the need to break through the imposed silence.
Around Amara, the early morning gathered an aura of quiet curiosity and subtle tension. A few students slowly emerged from the crowd, drawn by her silent defiance. A Latina girl with eyes full of unspoken courage. A tall boy who rarely spoke, but whose presence resonated deeply, and a shy teenager quietly recording the moment with trembling hands. Inside the school building, teachers peered through frosted windows. Some whispered among themselves, exchanging looks of disbelief and worry. Others hastily closed the blinds, as if they wished to keep the harsh reality at bay.
In that frozen moment, all my doubts faded like mist. I recalled the countless whispered stories of loss and prejudice that had haunted my family. My mother's quiet tears after unfair dismissals at work, my older cousin's experiences with racial profiling on city streets. No longer was I just a silent observer. With every ounce of courage in my trembling body, I raised my handmade sign higher, determined to let the truth shine through the fog of conformity.
Then, in a moment that felt both fragile and monumental, her voice broke through the oppressive silence.
We deserve justice.
Her shout, though not overwhelmingly loud, resonated deeply. It was a call that shattered the fragile barrier of imposed silence, reverberating off the cold walls and the frozen hearts alike. The impact was immediate. The few students who had once hesitated began to murmur in agreement, their eyes lighting up with a shared spark of rebellion. The shiver that had run down Amara's spine transformed into a fiery determination as the unspoken truth found its echo in the gathering crowd. Outside, in the chill of the morning, the cold air carried away not only the sound, but also the hope that had lain dormant for too long. After that defining moment, silence did not return to its former oppressive state. Instead, it was transformed into a quiet defiance that spread through the corridors of Franklin High. For hours afterward, whispers filled the hallways, whispers of pride, of fear, of a burgeoning sense of solidarity. I stood there, shivering not only from the cold, but also from an overwhelming surge of emotions. In that moment, I realized my voice was not just my own. It was the voice of every single person, silenced by fear, discrimination, and neglect.
I felt raw and exposed, as if the universe had peeled away every layer of doubt and fear, leaving only truth in its wake. In that moment, I promised myself that I would never let silence be the end of my story. I would shout, I would write, I would lead, for me, for them, for all of us who dared to dream of justice.
As the morning wore on, the chill was replaced by an undercurrent of hope. The school's brick facade, once a silent witness to conformity, now seemed to embrace the possibility of change. The air felt thicker with resolve, as if the building itself understood that a new chapter had begun. I walked back home that day with a heart both heavy and light, heavy with the memories of all those who had been ignored, and light with the promise of tomorrow where our voices could never be stilled.
I knew that this single moment would ripple into something greater than any one of us. Today was only the beginning, the first cry of many yet to come.
In the cold light of that day, a young girl's defiant shout became the spark that ignited a movement that promised to rewrite the narrative of silence, prejudice, and injustice for good. The protest lasted only minutes that morning, but its echo lingered for days. Whispers became questions. Questions turned into conversations. Conversations sparked debates. And in the heart of it all stood Amara, no longer just a girl with a sign, but a symbol of resistance.
Why don't we talk about Black history beyond February? I asked in class, my voice steady but charged with urgency. The room fell quiet. My teacher, Mr. Keller, adjusted his glasses, visibly uncomfortable, but I didn't look away. I couldn't. I saw too much silence masquerading as neutrality.
Support came from unexpected places. The janitor, Mr. Ellis, a quiet man with a limp, nodded at Amara in the hallway one day, slipping her a folded note. "Keep going. I see you." But so did the backlash. Parents emailed the school board. Anonymous comments flooded her social media. "Stop playing the victim," they wrote. "You're dividing us."
One night, I cried until my throat hurt. I asked myself if it was worth it. The weight of it all, the hatred, the threats, the loneliness, pressed on my chest like stone. But then I looked at that same protest sign, worn, crumpled, stained from the morning dew, and I remembered. I wasn't alone anymore.
By the next week, more students spoke out. A group created a club called Real History. They organized a lunchtime teach-in about the Tulsa massacre. They held signs that read, "Silence is violence." Franklin High was no longer quiet. The building buzzed with discussion, discomfort, and transformation.
When I stepped up to the microphone that night in the auditorium, my knees shook, but my voice did not. I looked at the board members, their expressions unreadable. Then I looked at the crowd behind me, students, parents, even teachers, and I felt an unbreakable wall of support.
The days after the school board hearing were tense. Local news stations picked up the story. The footage of Amara's speech was shared, reposted, and debated. Suddenly, the fight for justice at Franklin High was a citywide conversation. But with visibility came risk. A brick was thrown through Amara's family's window one night. Her father stood in silence as they swept up the glass. Her mother didn't let her walk to school alone anymore.
I was called to the principal's office. I sat across from Dr. Morales, her fingers folded tightly. "You've caused a lot of disruption, Amara," she said, "but you've also made us listen." She slid a document across the desk. It was a proposal for a new elective course, African American History, open to all students. "It starts next semester," she added.
The announcement was just the beginning. Teachers volunteered to revise curriculum. Parents formed a multicultural advisory group. And more students began sharing their own stories about profiling, fear, invisibility. Amara wasn't the only voice anymore. She had sparked a chorus. And that chorus would not be silenced.
We gathered in the auditorium again, but this time no one was afraid. I stood on stage with others, black, brown, white, all colors, and we each read a line of the new school declaration. We are seen. We are heard. We are equals. We rise together. I looked out into the crowd and saw tears, not of pain, of recognition, of hope.
In the weeks that followed the protest, Amara's life changed in small, complicated ways. Some teachers treated her with newfound respect. Others avoided eye contact. A few students, once friendly, now kept their distance, unsure whether to admire or fear her boldness. She noticed how the janitor, Mr. Ellis, now gave her a small nod every morning. Not a big gesture, just enough to say, still watching, still proud. Even the lunch lady, Miss Clarabelle, began slipping her extra fruit, whispering, "You keep your head high, baby."
Daddy, did I do the right thing? I asked one evening, sitting at the kitchen table as he sorted through bills. He looked at me long and hard, not angry, just measuring the weight of what I had carried. Right ain't always easy, baby, he said, but you lit a match in a dark place, and now people can see.
One afternoon, Amara's history teacher handed her an envelope. "Someone left this in my box for you," he said. It was from Mrs. June Templeton, one of the oldest black residents in the neighborhood, a woman who had attended the same high school in 1963. Inside, written in a delicate, slanted hand, were the words, "You are doing what we dreamed of. You are the future we marched for. Thank you, child."
By spring, the school library had an entirely new section: Black authors, civil rights documentaries, biographies of women like Angela Davis and Ida B. Wells. I helped organize a reading group. We called it Books That Breathe. Some kids joined out of curiosity, some to challenge me, but most stayed because for the first time they saw themselves in the pages.
Graduation arrived. The auditorium was full, buzzing with camera flashes, laughter, the occasional sniffle from proud parents. Amara was named valedictorian. She stood at the podium, her gown pressed, her voice calm. But her eyes, they burned with memory and purpose.
They told me change couldn't start with just one voice, but here we are, voices together, eyes open, hearts wide. This is not the end. It's the beginning we never thought we'd live to see.
As the applause faded, Amara stepped down from the stage. Her legs felt shaky, not from fear but from release, as if months of holding herself tight had finally loosened. Students reached out to hug her, some with tears, others with pride. One boy, a shy freshman she'd barely spoken to, pressed a note into her hand before disappearing into the crowd. The note read, "I was going to drop out, but then I heard you. Thank you for showing me I belong here."
That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my room with the lights off, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the city beyond my window. I thought about how far we'd come, how close we'd come to breaking. I remembered the insults scribbled on my locker, the teacher who once called me aggressive for raising my hand too often, the hallway that went silent when I walked past. But I also remembered my classmates' voices rising in unison during the march, the warmth of my mother's hands when she braided my hair that morning, the weight of history, and the light of hope.
Months passed, but the impact didn't fade. Other schools in the district began asking for Amara to speak. City council members invited her to youth panels. Even universities started sending her letters, not just offering scholarships, but asking her to shape their inclusion policies. But for Amara, the biggest reward came quietly. It was when she saw the girl who once never spoke in class, now leading the debate team, or when her white classmates asked, with honest curiosity, "What can we read to understand more?"
One afternoon, I walked to the old library downtown, the one my grandmother used to take me to. I hadn't been back in years. Dust still clung to the corners, but the scent of old pages, it was like coming home. I sat in the reading room, flipping through a worn copy of Baldwin's essays. A librarian approached me, soft-spoken. "You're the girl from Franklin High, aren't you? I just want to say, you made us all proud."
University was everything Amara had hoped for and feared. The campus buzzed with energy. Students on bikes, chalk messages on the sidewalks, flyers for protests and poetry nights pinned to corkboards. But even here, the shadows of inequality followed. Professors who mispronounced her name. Class discussions on race where everyone turned to her, as if she were the ambassador for an entire people. Students who said, "You're not like the others," and thought it was a compliment. At first, I bit my tongue. I didn't want to be labeled angry, difficult, too much. I told myself to focus on my studies, to keep my head down and just get the degree. But silence began to feel heavier than truth. One afternoon during a seminar on systemic oppression, I raised my hand. We can't discuss systems if we don't first acknowledge who built them, who they benefit, and who they hurt. And no, I won't be your token voice. I'll be my own. The response was polarizing. Some students thanked her quietly after class. Others unfollowed her on social media. A professor emailed her a recommendation letter out of the blue. Another avoided calling on her in class for the rest of the semester. She joined a coalition of students pushing for a Black Studies program. And late at night, they sat cross-legged on the library floor, surrounded by books and pizza boxes, arguing about strategy and solidarity.
I started writing a letter to the girl I used to be, the girl who sat in the back of the classroom, afraid to raise her hand too high, the girl who thought anger was a flaw and silence a strength. You are not too loud. The world is just too used to your silence. Keep speaking. Keep growing. Your voice will carry farther than you ever dreamed.
Years passed. Amara no longer needed introductions. She had become a name spoken in classrooms, quoted in documentaries, invited to conferences around the globe. Yet she never forgot the cracked tiles of Franklin High, or the trembling hands of the girl she once was. She stood now before a crowd of thousands in Geneva, the United Nations backdrop behind her. But when she spoke, it wasn't with grandeur. It was with gravity, clarity, and love.
We must stop treating justice like it's rare, like it's a prize reserved for a few. Justice is not rare. It is withheld, and it's time we open the gates. I was told once that my anger would destroy me, but what they didn't know is that it would build bridges. That rage, when harnessed by truth, becomes light.
After the speech, she flew back home, not to a city or a building, but to the people who first lit her fire. Her mother met her at the airport, now older, grayer, but still strong. Her old teacher, Mr. Collins, sent a letter. "You taught me more than I ever taught you."
And then it happened. Not in fanfare, but in small changes. The police officer who once profiled her was now required to take racial bias training. A law was passed in her state mandating diversity in school curriculum. Her hometown named a new youth center after her grandmother. Justice didn't arrive like a parade. It came like a sunrise, slow, steady, undeniable.
Amara's story became a seed, planted in young hearts across the world. In classrooms in Brazil, in protests in South Africa, in poetry circles in Chicago, her words lived on.
I am not the end of a story. I'm a beginning, a spark. You are the fire. Now go light the world.